You are listening to the Depression to Expression podcast, where we're going to talk about mental health in the workplace with my dear friend Sean Rabel. Now, let me kick a scenario for everyone listening. You know, people come and go in our lives. We develop relationships. Sometimes our friendships crumble before us. But do you ever meet a human being? Do you ever meet someone in your life and just say, that is one hell of a person? I swear that's the thought that was triggered when I sat down with Sean. I'm like, this guy has one head on his shoulders. I can't wait for you all to listen to this podcast episode. Sean, thanks so much for sitting down with me. I can't wait to have lunch with you in person, that beautiful in-person connection come February. But listen, if you are all interested in what Sean does for mental health in the workplace, all of his links are below. If you're interested in what I do in regards to mental health in the workplace, all of my links are below. Let's waste no time, as there are no sponsors, and this is an ad-free environment. I'm going to make up my own sponsor right now. This podcast episode with Sean is brought to you by dish towels. Dish towels. Stop moving around the water on my plate and let's start absorbing. Now, if there was a company that actually made a beautiful dish towel and it absorbed the water, I would put that sponsorship on my podcast. So for those listening, please drop me a line. And if you're using dish towels that absorb water, I need you. I'm wasting so much time and effort trying to dry these babies. Okay, I'm into the manual labor of washing dishes. I find it therapeutic. I find it meditative. But when I get to the drying process and my towels just are not absorbing this water, it tests my patience. So if you have any advice on dish towels that absorb water, please let me know. Okay, that's enough of that. Here is Sean about workplace mental health and his awesomeness in 3, 2, 1. Sean, good to have you on the podcast, my friend.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Nice to be here.
So as I always like to say to guests, social media and technology, of course, costs and benefits. We got together and met each other through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So this is amazing. It wouldn't have happened in 1850.
It would not have, no.
Unless I made the trek to Vancouver, and then probably like a horse would have died on the way and I would have had some illness. Yeah, exactly. So I really appreciate you coming on. Now, I really just want to jump right into it. When we met on LinkedIn, you said you were doing a lot of work, obviously in the mental health space, but you said you were becoming open with your story.
Yeah.
With mental health issues and how you've been doing this in the workplace, which we'll get to in a minute. But I thought we could just, open up the conversation here and you could share a bit of who you are and your story, in regards to mental health.
Sure. Yeah, no, happy to. Thank you for asking. So probably about 13 years ago, most people didn't know this, but I was going through a difficult time in my personal life, something I couldn't control. And most people saw me as a happy-go-lucky, person. This time in my life, things got really dark and I didn't know where to go. Started to get into deep depression, and to a point where I actually was driving home over a bridge and started turning the wheel. And it got really serious. And not to start this conversation in that place, but that's where it really starts is I hit a place that I didn't know what to do. And I tried to deal with it myself, and it just got worse and worse, to that point where I was turning that wheel going, what's going on? I'm broken. Something's happened. So I tried to pull myself together, went back to work the next day, and my boss came in and said, are you okay? And I just broke down and says, I'm not okay. And she got me into counseling and support, and over about 3 months, was able to gain back control and figure out the tools and what I could control and not control, and what I was attaching meaning to, and gain that control back. And so I kept that story to myself and to very close people for many years. And through a Tony Robbins event 3 years ago, I didn't know what I was going to learn at a Tony Robbins event. You learn a lot of stuff about yourself. That story came up. And I've been in HR, total rewards, benefits for almost 20 years. But I've never really shared that story. I never connected it to what I was doing necessarily. So I was sharing this story, just came out in one of the events in March 2017. Started talking to this realtor who was from Vegas. A lot of realtors at a Tony Robbins event. So surprise, surprise. So I started sharing the story, and he just grabbed me in. This guy Dylan, he just grabbed me in and just said, "Thanks, glad you're here today. You're meant to still be. I'm glad you didn't do anything else on that bridge." And then I just started going, man, I have a higher responsibility being in the HR team and total rewards. Like, people need to know we have these counseling services and programs. I need to bring my story to that. Why was I ashamed about that? The stigma around it. And so I went back to my workplace and started sharing my story with my team, started blasting out to like 7,000 employees. Like, we have counseling, we have this stuff. I started getting letters from people saying, "Thank you. I didn't even know we had this." We had a lot of remote workers, a lot of broken marriages. We had substance abuse issues and things were going on. I didn't even realize. And letters saying, "You saved my marriage," to "I was on the border of suicidal. I got support. Thank you, Sean." So it was an awakening 3 years ago that then put me into this hyper curious state of how I could actually show up and just take things to another level, professionally and personally.
Wow. So this was back in 2017. And since then, what happens, and first of all, Sean, thank you so much for sharing this. And I'm sure you're getting, very comfortable sharing this and know the impact that just sharing this story, your personal experience has on people clearly. But as you continue to share this, what are kind of the responses, more of the responses that you're getting from people, especially in the workplace?
Yeah, it's been overwhelming supportive. To people actually sharing more stories I didn't even know. People I used to work with have reached out since saying, "I see you're sharing your story. I see what you're doing online and stuff. Did you know I was dealing with, a son that was bipolar, and I was dealing with this that was going on?" So it was starting to create this community, this vibe going, man, there's more under the surface that was going on. But we spend so much time in the workplace that we don't spend the time to get to know people, and at least people weren't feeling safe that they could talk about this stuff. They didn't know where to go, especially in HR departments, which tend to be the caretakers, the caregivers. Take that in any, whether it's in an educational institution where you've got teachers that tend to be that, or in the family where the parents, they're the caregivers. HR teams didn't know where to go sometimes. People assume that HR people actually had all the support. They knew where to go, and not necessarily. They were always trying to put on the best face. So yeah, the reaction's been great in terms of people just appreciating the story, hearing more stories, people starting to want to, do something different. And just my biggest goal when I talk to anybody is, what's one thing you can do that's going to change a life and create that ripple, right? And that's just people just knowing that there's somebody there that gets it, that is not going to judge them. So
what made you not share this? So you said you were in HR and this total rewards for 20 plus years. What made you not share that experience as time went on?
Well, it was when it happened, I was younger in my career, so I thought it was maybe impacting my career progression. People would see me maybe as I just thought maybe people would judge me. And there would be assumptions made, and is this the right place to share it? And I'll do it at home. It's a personal thing. Yeah. As you grow your career and you're trying to, young professional, you just don't want to take any chances. And you didn't see it talked about. So it wasn't something that was, especially, 10, 15 years ago. It's a little bit more now, which is great. You definitely see a bit of a wave happening. But back then, even coming out, as a gay man, coming out was difficult at workplace, and I dealt with some bullying around that. And so that probably led into a little bit of, not revealing more about myself, based on how, coming out at work, and some of the behavior. So there was support. There was also those that said things that were inappropriate and difficult.
Right. I think that's probably, you see this in the work that you do as a mental health consultant, right? Helping these businesses bring mental health and wellness to the forefront of their business, right? How it can actually help business, which is why I'm so interested in what you do. And when the mics go off, we can maybe have a longer conversation. But I think that's a really great point you bring up is what message would you have for young professionals or any professional really? Because the fear is that if I come out about how I'm feeling mentally and how I'm lacking motivation, I'm feeling depressed, I'm suicidal, that this will then affect your career in a negative way. That is a massive fear. What would you like to say to those people in, let's say, HR departments, or how people receive that message in companies, or how people can foster this safer, non-judgmental environment? I know it's a big question.
Big question. Yeah. No, but it's breaking it down, right? And so for me, my advice to young professionals is to stay true to yourself and to your heart and try and make sure you do find that avenue, whether it's in the workplace or not. You've got to find somebody to talk to about what's going on for you. And so I've had some peer mentors and stuff outside of my workplace that have helped me in my career and also personally. Who are your close friends or family that you can talk to? Maybe your parents, it could just be a close friend. So your proximity and your peer group is really powerful, and I would definitely give advice and to find one or two people that you really can be your full self, right? So that's really important. For organizations, my program or the strategy is 4 pillars because it is complex. So pillar 1's awareness, right? So how do we reduce stigma and talk about this stuff that's so prevalent in the workplace around the world? To the learning side, the educational side, what is it, right? What are we actually talking about? What can we do? And then the third thing is around sponsorship. So executive sponsorship, leadership, actually caring to show up and be part of this, not give it to HR to fix. Right. And so true sponsorship, what does that look like? And then the last one's the most difficult one is integration with results. So integration with results is your policies, your programs, your insurance and benefit carriers. How are they showing up for your employees when they adjudicate a claim? Are they consistently looking at mental health claims the same way or not? Right. And looking at your data, your drug costs, absenteeism costs, all those types of things. How do you integrate this stuff into your workplace? And it's connecting it to diversity and inclusion, right? Because it's all about, am I included here? All types. And do I have a voice? And does it matter? So yeah, it's a complex thing, a great question. No,
that's great. But as far as I think a lot of people think that it only stems and ends at the HR department. Whereas you say sponsorship, we need to have our leaders talk about mental health regardless of if they have personal experience or not. So is that a big education piece for you to go in and start educating leaders about what the heck does mental health even mean? Like, let's start there, right?
Well, we all have mental health. We all have, right? And so we're all going to be on different spectrums of that, good days, bad days, and then things go into multiple weeks and you're starting to get into chronic conditions of depression or whatnot. So there is, so what does it mean? It means how do we, like one workplace where it was actually connecting it to the customer strategy. So how are we working our frontline staff supporting customers coming in that may have mental health issues? Like, how are we actually supporting folks coming into our locations or that interactions happening with us on the phone or in person that may be dealing or struggling? So equipping them with the skills and the tools to stay safe, but also not make assumptions about things, right? And what words matter. So for executives and leaders, it's good business to really think about that. We all know somebody or ourselves have some kind of lived experience. If we really just think about it, everybody will raise a hand when you ask that question in a room. So that's number one. Number two is when you think about the impact and the cost to the bottom line. So some executives, it's like done, it's good business, just makes sense. And others need to see the ROI. So that's fine. So there's lots of studies that for every $1 you put into this, you get $1.62 back. Okay, well, how are you going to break that down, John? Well, we can talk about absenteeism and presenteeism and the impact of productivity and all that. We can look at your drug costs. We can look at your short-term disability costs and start to measure if you actually give people the care they need and they know where to go in that preventative space. When it's a trickle, not a waterfall, it compounds. So you can look at things from a hard P&L impact and also from the culture, the engagement, your brand, who you are. And so in today's tight labor market, organizations that actually get this and start to mobilize around it will actually start to see that their engagement scores, retention scores, who they are in that community, it's huge. So yeah.
I think a big concern too is that what a lot of businesses are trying to do, at least in my experience learning this and speaking as well with corporations in Toronto, and I hope to go to Vancouver too, is they're trying to avoid the long-term disability when it's like more preventative measures rather than reactive. Yeah. So it's like the employee, the coworker isn't going to feel great, and they're going to get to a point where I need 3 months off rather than maintaining mental health. It's finally having this reactive approach where, okay, now they're burnt out. Right. And now we're going to need to take all these measures and get them back up to speed and have an alternative working plan when they come in. Is that where a lot of the cost comes from as well?
Yeah, it's exactly that. I mean, a lot of the times you'll see people actually say, oh, you're struggling, to take some time off work, which is actually the wrong thing for some people. It actually creates more isolation. So actually making sure people are getting the care they need when they're at work versus, when you're dealing with a short term or a long term, then you get into, are you backfilling that person who's carrying a load of that, creating a domino effect, a ripple effect into your department or those that are picking up, right? And then getting those people back into work. So how do you stay connected with them while they're off? Should I ask them? What can I say? All those types of things. And most managers just don't want to even deal with it. But yeah, so the longer they're off, which may not be the right, then it costs more, obviously, and then to get them back into the fold. So are you holding a position or whatnot? It gets complex.
Right.
So
it is complex. It really is. I know.
But it's breaking it down, right? In terms of what are you doing for those already at work versus on maybe a short, some occurrences, maybe a couple of days here and there. You start looking at patterns. So some of the work we've been doing is looking at absenteeism patterns, and how do you isolate and start looking at that data and saying, oh, something's going on here, and look at the types of conversations you need to be having with those employees, saying, I'm noticing a pattern here. Is there something going on you need to know? Versus saying there's a performance issue, you just don't want to be here.
Exactly.
Where a lot of people go, right? And so it's working through all those stages to, the person's got an approved claim for short-term disability, or maybe it's not approved. There's still something going on. My team I work with in the last organization, just adore them, because that was such a critical thing I learned from them was, even when a decline claim, what are we doing for that decline claimant? There's still something going on. Just tough it up and get back to work. No, there's still something going on. I mean, I've met the definition of disability. There's still something going on. So yeah, it's a complex thing, but it's really, for me, it's about looking at each situation, and then what are the appropriate actions, and then what's the roles of leaders, managers, and the employees, and your insurance carrier or whatever. So.
I love that. And that goes back to the 4 pillars of starting 1, 2, 3, 4, starting at the front of awareness, then education. Now, as far as, I just kind of want to bring it back to a personal level sure. For you. When dealing with depression and your mental health challenges, what were some things that really helped you recover?
Well, I mean, definitely the counseling and the therapy helped. And knowing that I could access that again in the future. So even in the last 2 years, I've accessed support, right? So knowing that was available and how I would access it. So that was important. I learned that sometimes what the surface is of what I may be dealing with, that there's maybe stuff below that, right? So how to, the layers of the onion analogy. Mm-hmm. And so being humble in that and understanding that actually what I'm seeing that I'm reacting to actually could be other stuff below that. And then knowing, the peer group, as said before, which is super important, which is kind of neat to see some of the industry and start looking at peer support groups and technology with mental health, is that you can actually connect with people and say, I want to share my, what color I'm feeling today with my peer group that I've selected. So peer group is huge, and that just, who you spend time with and who's around you and who you can trust, and that changes everything, because the energy you surround yourself with will multiply, right? And so power of that.
When you came out, when was this? When you came out as a gay man?
It was in my early 20s, at least in the workplace. I was out a little bit before that personally with family. I was difficult at 18 at the personal coming out story, and then the coming out at work.
Right.
In my 20s, so a little bit later.
two very different experiences for you coming out, in your, let's just say, personal life and then work life. And you said there was some bullying going on. Did that, obviously that's going to have a negative effect on your mental health, but did that also encourage you to, learn about that, the importance of having that really solid support group and peer group around you?
Just knowing where to go and being able to talk through it. I've also learned that those moments that were difficult have made my heart and my compassion grow 10 times more, because I've been through that. So I'm grateful for those moments. Though tough, they've allowed me to show up the way I show up today with my teams and who I work with, is that you just don't know what everybody's going through all the time. So just be kind, right? And ask questions, be more curious, get out of the assumption game. So yeah.
I think that's one thing that's really interesting about what you do as a mental health consultant is you've have that lived experience. So would you say that, let's say, empathy drives a lot of the decisions and the presentations and conversations that you have with individuals outside the workplace, inside, it doesn't matter. Would you say that's a driving force?
Oh, huge, massive. Yeah. To me, it's, I go and sharing my story, because when you share your story, you will trigger something in the other person, the receiver of that it's just human nature, right? So if I talk about my mother, you'll think about your mother. If I talk about high school, you'll think about high school. It's just that mirroring effect that happens. So I find, by sharing my story and coming from a perspective of just being empathetic and just going down there, I've been there and I'm just here. I just want to listen. I'm not going to try and solve it necessarily in the moment. And whether it's an individual conversation or an organization, if it's an organization, I was talking to one earlier today saying, what's going on in your organization? What are the drivers? What do you think is happening? How do people feel at an employee level versus leaders? Are they connected? So yeah, it's trying to get in the mindset of the different types of personas, right? So you think about a call center, call center burnout, it's a thing. And the mindset of a call center rep and what goes on, and people are calling to say, thank you for your great company. It's usually calling to complain.
Exactly.
So my empathy, my understanding of what happens in a call center versus, maybe in a corporate environment or in a manufacturing environment, or on a site up north, or on a tugboat, or in an aviation camp up in Northwest Territories. I mean, I've worked in so many different industries at different parts that I do understand that it feels different depending on the industry and where you are located and what's around you and the type of work. And so you do need to ask lots of curious questions to really understand then where they are, so you can meet them at that and then kind of build the journey.
And that's why we're going to be best friends from now on, because you couldn't have this job, Sean, if you weren't a curious person, right? You're not going to every organization and, geez, I could pick your brain. So it seems like you've been to a lot of different ones, but you can't go in and just tell people, okay, hey, mental health problems, here's the fix. Here's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, right? So you go in and you ask these questions to say, okay, let me learn more about your business. What's happening? Let me get in the mind of an employee. Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah, you want to do a bit of that scan, right? And there's been a lot of studies out there. I know Google a couple of years ago they created these 7 questions around psychological health at Google. There's tons of material out there, right? What questions should I ask, right? So for me, I've kind of pulled from different places that resonate for me, that I think connect to some of the psychological standards that have been put out in Canada, 13 factors. Dr. Bill Howitt, amazing. Lots of credit to him. I've seen him speak a few times, and he's taken the 13 down to 5, and finding simple ways to say, like, well, what are the key things here that we need to ask, and then build a plan from that, and then track the results. I'm a compensation analyst by heart. I live in spreadsheets for many years, and so data matters, and it matters. So it's not just the soft stuff. It's actually saying, are we actually moving the needle on stuff? And so whether that's surveys and getting a sense of where people are on their engagement questions related to this stuff, to absenteeism rates or drug costs related to mental health. Like in my one organization, it was like the number 2 cost for drugs was with mental health related, depression related drugs.
Wow.
The people looking at that, are you looking at it in isolation? Are you looking at multiple data together? So yeah, it's I'm a data guy, so it's hard for me not to have a conversation saying, well, what data are you using today? What metrics should we have? beyond just the questions, it's then qualitative and the quantitative.
Exactly. Data matters. And man, when I figured out years and years ago how to use pivot tables and VLOOKUPs, that was just
Yes, we
what
we
a
get my world. We get my world. We are so it's like and it's surprising too. I remember one organization, we were looking at the stability of managers in a location, right? So it's a retail organization. And what we were seeing is if we moved a great manager from location to location too fast, the sales would suffer, the profit would suffer, the safety results would suffer, and engagement would suffer. If we kept that great manager in a location for X period of time before we moved them to fix another store, we saw positive results, stabilization. The leadership matters. The stability of leadership matters. Some of the biggest, we would see data in a recent organization, when you did a leadership shift or a technology shift, you would actually see more claims. It connects. So you do need to look at your business metrics. You need to look at those P&L statements, your safety, wherever the data sits, and compare it and say, well, what's driving that? Because mental health and burnout, all that, lots of different drivers and levers can trigger something, right? And so, leadership changes, technology changes, et cetera, can create huge burdens on folks and stress.
Completely.
And so for me, it's been great to, over my last couple of decades, find that correlation and diving into rows and rows of data to actually see that, wow, you could actually impact this.
That is such a cool thing to actually analyze, to see what's going on. Now, maybe a more qualitative or opinionated piece. What I like to say is, yes, technology changes, leadership changes, companies change, but biology stays the same. That's kind of my little go-to quote.
Like that.
So what do you think is driving an increase in mental health concerns? And there's no, speaking of data, there's no data that suggests that anxiety disorders, depression is on the decrease in Canada, right? It's all increasing, whether or not it's just because we're talking about it more, but there are more disability claims. There's more hospital visits for mental health concerns. There's more antidepressant prescriptions. So in your opinion, or in your experience, what do you think is behind all of this?
Yeah, it's multiple things. Technology for sure. I mean, the social media, it's just creates more of the "am I enough" kind of syndrome. So people live on their phones, they lose the connections, whether it's in personal or work. So I think the technology, social media, and where that's going. You have more remote workers, the gig economy, more isolation, which drives that. So people get more. I just recently became independent, and there's moments of I miss my team. So get it. So I think technology, I think there's a continual war for talent, right? So you do see the shifts, bigger companies acquiring smaller companies. It's happening in every industry. So you see more combining organizations, which means there's leadership shifts and job shifts, right? And so people start feeling at risk, right? So job security. So there's just more of that as a global economy, right? You're just seeing more of that consolidation starting to happen. Some industries more than others, but it's definitely prevalent. And then, there's more awareness of that, so people talk about it. It's great. So the Bell Let's Talk, and there's some amazing campaigns that are happening, and each country is a little bit different, but there's a lot more anti-stigma campaigns, which is great. You're seeing that. So then awareness is great. And now you can see maybe then how does that translate to the experience. Those are some of the main drivers I would think of. Yeah.
That's incredible. And no, I'm in complete agreement with that, actually. So in the interest of time, we haven't disagreed so far.
That's good.
Sometimes I like to find these disagreements, and we can educate each other. You can educate me. We go back and forth.
Finally.
Yeah. So far, so good. So far, so good.
Yeah.
In the interest of time, I'd like to open it up to you because my YouTube channel and podcast is full of people who have dealt with and are dealing with depression and anxiety disorders, and who have to go into work and they have to put in the 8 hours, and they're feeling terrible and they're scared to open up, and they come home, and to look forward to that the next day is not something that helps you sleep at night, right?
Yep.
Just opening it up to you, what would you like to say to the listeners and viewers who may be dealing with the mental health problem, who are struggling while listening?
Yeah, thank you. So many things, but I would say stay strong. It's okay to not be okay, right? And that even the toughest situations and in the moment doesn't make sense. Sometimes it later could fuel a learning, some compassion where you could help somebody else out, right? And so I think even in those tough moments, and it's sometimes hard, right? Because when you're dealing with it in the moment, but what I've learned and what I've just from is that even in those tough moments, actually have fueled me and taught me something that I can then share with others. And help somebody else out when they're going through something. So to them listening, or if anybody's out there, know that your story will help somebody too. But it's about, finding that support. How do you access, free anonymous, calls, or like in Canada, of course, there's the Mental Health Association. There's different chapters across. And so there's tons of free resources there. Definitely reach out. And you can talk to them for free. There's lots of great free counseling and services. Kids Help Phone if you're a kid. Kids Help Phone is amazing. There's suicide lines, etc. And the biggest thing I try and do every day is three things I'm thankful for. Right, so small things, just create that habit of going, I'm here. Number one, I'm a chance of me being around is 1 in 400 trillion or something like that.
That's right.
So that's pretty cool that I exist, that I can talk, that I can eat. So being very grateful for all the blessings we have, that we exist, that we can interact, and that we don't know what we don't know, right? And so I think just trying to stay curious and going, what am I learning out of this? What am I attaching meaning to? What's real, what isn't real? And so I use this I'll leave this last thing, which I think has been really helpful for me and for people that I work with. It's 4 quadrants. The first one is, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I feel? And what do I need? Sometimes just breaking up those thoughts, unpacking them and putting them in those quadrants makes you think about, well, what do I see happening, right? Versus what am I feeling? My emotions, which are real. Emotions are real. Do not discount them. What am I hearing? What are the words, right? Versus what am I not hearing? I'm just maybe making assumptions on stuff. And then what do I need, right? This is that ownership piece saying, what do I need? I need one person I can trust. I need a phone number I can call. That kind of thing. So this kind of see, need, hear, and feel that really helps people, I think, just kind of segment the thoughts and then try and take one action, just one thing. Try and smile when you can. It's amazing. It changes physiology. Good music, do a weird dance. Sometimes that helps. But if you're going through something really dark and heavy, know that it will get better, but you got to find that support. It's hard.
Sean, on that note, I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time and to speaking with me and all the listeners and viewers. If people want to check you out, get a hold of you, where should they go?
Yeah, so I've got a website, changeonelife.ca. So just as a sound, changeonelife.ca. We can maybe add that link on the site there. That would be the best way, and happy to connect with anybody.
changeonelife.ca, everyone. Link in the description and in the podcast description, YouTube description. Stay strong, everyone. Keep being you. Don't forget to express yourself. And Sean, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.